The community was hit with a storm of news yesterday. WoW had dropped a ton of articles covering the next patch, Embers of Neltharion, and there were a ton of different content creators like Draknos, Taliesin, Mr. GM, and so many more who had interviews with the dev team covering a variety of topics. And while I can't cover everything in this video, I do want to talk about the new Mythic Plus Dungeon pool that's making its way into Season 2, alongside my general opinion. If you live under a rock, I'm gonna leave the articles down in the description below if you'd like to read it for yourself. Anyways, I cover a ton of Mythic Plus related content on this channel, so if you'd be so kind, give that like button a gentle tickle. As Season 2 approaches, I do plan on continuing making dungeon and boss guides. Anyways, let's dive in. First things first, we are going to be reintroduced to dungeons we got to farm at the start of the expansion during the leveling process and those super juicy M0 world tours. First on the list, we have Brackenhyde Hollow. This dungeon, well, in its current state, will be rough. There are many important kicks that, if missed, will send your group running in fear. There are also plenty of disease effects that could possibly run amok. Fun fact, Paladin, Priest, and Monk are the only classes that can regularly remove diseases. While class toolkits are important, I think group composition may be a little too restrictive in this instance, in particular since most of the disease applications have no counterplay in their current iteration, meaning that you either have to heal through the damage or bring a certain class. While this dungeon might have some limitations, I do believe that some minor changes to certain casts could turn this dungeon into an extremely palatable instance. Hear me out. Most of the pulls in this instance have the potential to be massive, which is always fun for tank players and DPS players alike. The routing through this dungeon can also be a little bit more open. Groups can opt into taking different routes through the shoreline while saving their Tuskar from their cages. And then after downing the first boss, you can either head to either of the two bosses, choosing between the Toxic River or the Hunters and Beasts off to the left. Based on this choice though, the rest of the dungeon will be pretty linear for the most part, but I think this will make for a pretty engaging dungeon if they get the tuning right. Unlike Brackenhyde, Uldaman Legacy of Tyr will be extremely direct. In this instance, we are returning to Dragonflight pre-patch dungeon Uldaman, clearing trogs and ancient dwarves while exploring new passageways with the assistance of the Lost Vikings. This 5-boss dungeon, while extremely linear, should make a fairly pleasant experience, unless we have to manually fly there. Please, for the love of God, Blizzard, just add a portal to the Badlands. Next, we have Neltharis, the subterranean hangout for the Dejarin. This is probably my favorite dungeon out of the Dragonflight bunch. The routing through this dungeon will require your group to clear the first 3 bosses before heading to take on Warlord Sarga. You can either head towards Chargath and Forge Master Gorek, or you can take down Magma Tusk first. While there aren't too many standout pain points in this dungeon, the last boss does apply curses whenever players picked up cursed items, which is required to do in order to break the boss's shields. With only shamans, druids, and mages being able to remove curses, this boss can be extremely painful on tyrannical weeks unless they address tuning properly. What excites me the most about this dungeon is actually the unique weapon Forge Storm, a one-handed mace that causes your weapons to have a chance to ignite, causing your attacks to explode for fire damage split between all enemies. It's just a shame that we didn't have this in the first season with some of those unique equipped effects from the raid. The last dungeon we will be seeing is Halls of Infusion. Most of us should be more recently familiar with this dungeon since it was part of the Spark of Ingenuity questlines. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this dungeon. First and foremost, the trash leading up to the first boss is just extremely annoying. Between demoralizing shouts, roots, AoE damage, and a ton of kicks that are required, this trash is just super painful. I would recommend skipping it, but a lot of the trash also has Spectral Sight, so good luck. The boss fights in this dungeon are actually pretty dope though, I must admit, though the trash doesn't get any more pleasant to deal with, especially making your way from the second to third boss. And then on top of that, who doesn't love gauntlets? Leading up to the last boss, your group is going to need to navigate through waves of water accompanied with very annoying trash that have plenty of casts and a healthy dose of frontals. I'm not looking forward to this one personally. Accompanying the Dragonflight dungeons, Blizzard announced 4 returning dungeons from previous expansions, and I definitely think that excited the community. We're seeing the return of Freehold, which is easily the most popular mythic dungeon of all time. For those who missed out on that expansion, let me just quickly walk through why this dungeon was so beloved. This dungeon is really open, allowing for alternative routes for different groups. And while there are certain abilities that can be dangerous, more often than not, the counterplay is either kick or CC, which all classes have access to in some capacity. Along with that, most of the pulls are fairly large, and it's very easy to double or triple up some of these pulls. And I'm not really sure who doesn't love large pulls. Also, as a tank player, most of the damage is physical, which is super nice and a great change of pace from how most of Season 1 ended up playing out. I personally found the boss fights in this place fairly enjoyable and they're unique in their own way, but there are definitely some downsides. First, the second boss, Council of Captains, rotates with 2 bosses being hostile and 1 being friendly. With an assumed 10-week season, like we saw in Dragonflight Season 1, this means that you'll never be seeing a repeating affix set with a repeating boss set, which might be something to worry about for some of the top-end players, but I'm not sure since I'm just a scrub. Also, this mechanic sucks. The role-playing for the third boss can also be annoying. There is a little counterplay you can do here by having a rogue or druid sneak over to start the RP early, but in a pug this might be difficult to achieve. Overall though, people love this place and I'm excited to see it return as well. With Freehold being returned, we're also seeing Underrot returning, another Battle for Azeroth dungeon. I think that some people are more excited about this place than I am, but in Battle for Azeroth we spent many months playing with the Corruption Power and Seasonal Affix Awakened, which in short allowed groups to make skips of their own, needed to avoid all of the extremely brutal trash, which of course we're no longer going to have access to. There is also a slight RNG element at the beginning where these different packs spawn on either side, so you need to be aware of that as a group before proceeding down either of the platforms to the first boss. Now luckily we no longer have to deal with teaming as an affix, and I really hope that I didn't trigger any PTSD for any of you Keystone veterans. The rest of the dungeon beyond the first boss is fairly enjoyable, allowing for groups to pull multiple mobs together with fairly engaging boss fights. Just be sure to hit 100% trash count before heading down to the final boss. If not, you'll be stuck. Now, we are seeing a return of Neltharion's Lair, a Legion dungeon, and while thematically appropriate, not necessarily the most popular one. There isn't much room for innovation when it comes to this instance routing since it is extremely linear. From personal experience, I don't have many pleasant memories of this place, but I also didn't start playing Legion until patch 7.3, so I'm going to need to see this dungeon again in current content to truly give my opinion of this place. Lastly, and surprisingly, we are seeing the Vortex Pinnacle make its way into the Mythic Plus scene. Now, this is unique because unlike Season 4 of Shadowlands or Dragonflight Season 1, Vortex Pinnacle wasn't designed originally with Mythic Plus or even Challenge Mode dungeons in mind. Dungeons back in Cataclysm were very, very casual forms of content, and from what I can remember, were pretty simple. Therefore, a lot of mechanics were just uninspired, and I think Blizzard might need to do a little bit of a glow up to this dungeon when it comes to mechanics, but I'm really excited to revisit the Vortex Pinnacle because most of the Cataclysm dungeons were just very, very cool and well designed. Also, a chance to farm the Drake of the North Wind. These are all exciting for the most part. We are already seeing Blizzard nerf many of these different abilities in these dungeons, which is a promising sign. Let's hope they get it right. Let me know what dungeon you guys are most excited for, or least excited for. And a massive shout out to my lovely Patreons, because without them there'd be much less of, well, whatever this was. I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.